I'm going to make a bag to hang stuff on that will go right here in my Casita camper. I want my finished bag to be 13 inches, which is the width that's there in this spot, by 22 inches tall when finished. I'm going to do a 1/2 inch seam all the way around, so I've got 2 pieces that are 14 by 23. And then you could use the same fabric or different fabrics, just whatever you have on hand that you want to use. I'm using the same fabrics for my 3 pockets, but I'm going to embellish the top of the pockets with a different fabric. So this bottom pocket is the same width, 14 inches, and it's 9 inches tall. And then I have cut out a top part for the pocket. And it is 3 by 14. Now it's going to form a bias tape, so it will be much narrower when I get done. And my next pocket is 14 inches wide again by 8 inches tall, and it's going to come down here a little bit, and then we'll overlap. And then another 3 by 14, but this time I'm using a yellow fabric. This is my camper curtain fabric, so I'm trying to tie that in together. And then my final top pocket is 14 again by 6. And then I have this blue fabric again, 3 by 14. So the first thing I want to do is to attach the bias tape. I'm going to call this bias tape. It's not really cut on the bias, but I'm going to attach that to my pockets. So to do that, I want to fold it in half and press. And then I'm also going to fold under about 1/2 inch on each side. So it'll be 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, and then fold it over to meet. Okay, so I have these folded over and pressed. So now I'm going to attach it to the top of a pocket. I can see now, looking at this, that I did not cut this quite straight. It's a little off, but it will be fine for this project. So I want the top of my pocket to be right at the middle fold here. Make sure that on the back it's also all folded under, and then I'm going to sew right along the edge here close to the folded edge. Then my next pocket is going to have yellow. Again, I'm going to make sure that's folded over and line this up. Looks like I cut a little bit more than 14. I think that's just what I had there, but I can trim that up after I get done. Top pocket, it's going to have this fabric again. So now if you are happy with that, you can move on to the next step. I think that I want to add some rickrack right at the seam here on each of my pockets. 3 pieces of rickrack. This is jumbo rickrack. For this rest of it, I've been using a white thread, but for this, I want to use a thread that matches the rickrack. And what I'm going to do is use a glue stick and run some glue just a light coating of glue along one side of the rickrack and press it down where I want it. And then I want to let that dry a little bit before I sew. Okay, I have the rickrack sewn on now. had a light blue thread that didn't quite match, but it was closer than the white, and that's what I had. So now I'm going to start putting it together. So from the top of one of the big pieces of fabric, this is the long skinny piece. So from the top of it, I'm going to put the smallest pocket, and it went upside down. So you have the right sides facing each other. And I'm going to go down 9 inches so that the bottom of my pocket is 9 inches from the top of the fabric. And then I'm going to pin it across here. It's a little bit hard to see since it's the same fabric on the same fabric. This right here is the edge of this pocket. Bring this up a little bit. So this right here is the edge of this smallest pocket, and it's upside down. So that I'm going to sew along here, and that way when I finish sewing and I flip this up, it will be going the right way. I'm going to use probably a 1/2 inch seam. Okay, so after I sewed this together, you can see my seam right here. I flipped it up and I pressed this seam. So at this point, I'm going to pin these edges together just to hold it in place. And then I'm going to make some little smaller pockets here. If you know you're going to want the same size smaller pockets like this as on the next pocket, you could do this all at once, but I want different size pockets. So up here on the top, I have my Maxx air fan. So I want to make a pocket for that. So I'm going to have a seam over here, and then this, but it's a little bit deep, so I think I'm going to go over out to here, pin that, and see how that feels. I'm going to pin over here, like there's the seam on the edge. I think it's okay, but I'm going to go over just a little bit further. So that is 5 3/4. Let's just make it 6 inches. 6 inches from that edge. I'm going to make one pocket. And then I also have my TV remote. I'm going to put the remote control on one side and the Maxx air controller, and then that will leave a little hole in here, perfect for a little tube of lotion or something like that. So now that I know how far over I want my pockets to be, I'm going to sew a seam in that spot. So I did shift it back over to about 5.5 inches for this first pocket. So I'm going to I have a dressmaking marking pencil, and I have different colors, but this pink one I hope will be able to mark and show up on this blue fabric. And then once you're done with this marking, you can brush the mark out. I'm just going to draw a line right along here so I know where to sew. And then this line is about 5 inches from the edge. So now I'm going to sew from here, the seam, up to the end of the pocket, and I will reinforce it here. Go back and forth several times just to make sure it holds good. All right, now for my next set of pockets. So I've got my middle pocket, and I'm going to turn it upside down with the unsewn edge at the top of my project. And I want to come down about 15 inches from the top. Again, after I sew this, and flip it up, then this will be the right side it will be at. Okay, so I have this one sewn. You can see the seam here, right here, and then I flipped it up and I pressed it down. And you can see this pocket does overlap this pocket a little bit. So when I put my seams in this pocket, it's going to, I either need to stop down here with the seam, or if I go all the way up, it is going to affect the pocket ahead of it, on top of it. I was planning on doing one right down the middle, and so it is going to affect this pocket just a little bit, but I think I'll still be able to put a tube of lotion in there, no problem. So I'm going to sew all the way down the middle of this pocket, and then I'm also going to sew down the middle of this pocket, so I can do both of these at the same time. So I've lined this pocket up, the two bottoms lined up together, and I will pin it all on. Okay, and then I want to mark my seam down the middle here. So 14 inches wide, so the middle will be at 7. I'm going to go all the way up here into this pocket. I'm going to sew all the way here down to the bottom, and I will reinforce here and then again here, just to make sure that the pockets don't come unstitched there. Okay, so while I was at the sewing machine, I went ahead and stitched all around here, did a basting stitch so I can take these pins out and not have to worry about it all coming apart now. So now I have the second piece of 14 by 23 that I cut, and I'm going to put it over the top of this. So if it has a right side, you want to do right sides together. And if you wanted to give it more substance, you could add some interfacing or something like that. I think mine's going to be fine, even if it's a little floppy. You want to pin all the way around, and then I'm going to sew all the way around till I get to the bottom, and then I will sew around the corners on the bottom and leave a few inches open to turn. So I finished sewing it, and I did clip the corners, and now I am turning it. Now, an alternative to this, if you did not want to put a backing on it, would be you could either hem the edges, or you could put seam binding all the way around it. If you're going to put seam binding all the way around it, you would want to start with smaller pieces of fabric. You would probably only want to make it 13 inches wide instead of the 14 inches wide. Otherwise, you'll end up with something wider than what will fit in that spot. On mine anyway, that's the dimensions. Definitely should measure yours, it might be different. Okay, I'm going to take this to the ironing board, and I'm going to press it at the seams, and then I'm going to press this in right here. I did take a wet rag to try to get all of the pink markings out, and that will rub out as I use it also. So now the final two steps is to take a needle and thread and sew up the bottom. And if you prefer, you can also just stitch along the bottom with the sewing machine. And then I'm going to sew some of these plastic hooks along the top, right in here, to hang it with, and then I will put some command hooks in the camper to hook these over.